Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar featuring BASF. And today's webinar is about developing your IP and startups with corporate strategic alliances. So those of you who have joined this webinar series before know that this webinar series is being put together or is being broadcast to help with with the University Startups Demo Day, as well as for universities, researchers, startups to know what our corporate selection committee members are looking for in terms of technologies, startups, as well as alliances. So as I mentioned earlier, for today, we are featuring BASF. But before we go ahead, I'd just like to let everyone know that we are doing this webinar for our next demo day. So it's on October 16 and 17. So if you're a university, a startup, or a researcher, maybe a Fed lab or a government agency, you might be interested to know that for the next demo day, we are highlighting three major programs. So one of them is the demo day itself, where we invite uh, universities and startups to submit companies to us in order to gain presentation slots at the conference to have meetings with interested corporates as well as investors. The second highlight of those 2 days is the IP to Startup program. So we've mentioned this a few times before that not only are we accepting startups for the demo day, but we're accepting patents and IP as well. So if you're a university and you have a portfolio of patents or technologies that you would like to get scored by our corporate selection committee, we do encourage you to submit to the program as well. And the highest scoring IP will be included in a book that will be distributed to the corporates. And the last is the Investor Roadshow, where we'll feature companies that are Series A, Series B. Mostly these companies have also gone through the first and the second University Startups Demo Day process, and we're requesting them to resubmit in order for them to qualify to pitch or to be viewed by a delegation of Chinese venture funds, as well as angels and VCs in the United States for the next round of funding. Now, for the first two programs, the University Startups Demo Day and the IP to Startup program, we do have an information video about these two programs, and you'll find it on our website. You'll find them on our website. I'll show you where to locate them later on in the webinar. We will have Q&A at the end. So for those of you who have general or specific questions for our speaker today, all you need to do is to type in your question in the questions box of your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll make sure to get to as many questions, this afternoon. This session is being recorded, and the slides will be made available on our website. So we usually send out an email post webinar to let you know where to find it or when the video and the slides are available. You can also watch more videos by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and there you'll find other webinars, other corporate presentations, as well as information videos about the two programs I mentioned earlier, the IP to Startup program, as well as the University Startups Demo Day. All right. So just as a reminder, the deadline for the submission of the IP and the startups is coming up. So this is just the first deadline. We have one coming up on Friday, but again, we do always encourage people to submit as early as possible. That way, it gives us enough time to review your applications. Our next deadline is coming up in August, but we'd like to encourage everyone to try and make the July 14 deadline. It just makes more sense, and it just makes it easier for us to to review your applications and to get back to you if we do find something that needs to be corrected. And the same goes for the IP submissions as well. All right. So in this webinar series, we are we do have a few more lined up. So on July 13th, which is on Thursday, we have another another chemical company presenting. So it's going to be Eastman Chemical Company. Then the weeks after, we have Printpak, GlaxoSmithKline, Schlumberger, and on August 3rd, we'll have Evonik. The schedule will be updated once we have more members of our corporate selection committee confirmed. All right, so now to get down to today's business. So I'd like to introduce today's speaker. He's currently senior manager for technology scouting in BASF, and he works for the design, implementation, and operation of the North American Scouting Network, which includes more than 50 scouts within the region. So to tell you a little bit more about what he's looking for and how BASF works with universities and other groups in order to scout for new startups and technologies, I'd like to introduce Dr. Werner Kaufman from BASF. Werner, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Ria.
Okay, you should be presenter now. There you go.
Is that visible?
Yes, it's perfect. There you go.
Right. All right. Good afternoon. Good morning for those on the West Coast. I'd like to talk a little bit about BASF and our unmet needs, and hopefully by the end of the session, you'll have a better understanding what BASF does, what we're about, how to interact with us, and also have a better understanding of what we're looking for in general. As Ria pointed out, BASF is part of the selection committee for NSET 2's demonstration day, and that's been really a big success so far, and we're happy to continue working together with NSET 2 on that. So let me start out with giving you a little bit of an overview of BASF. There we go. So BASF, as you know, is probably the largest chemical company in the world. Sales are about 65 billion US dollars. We have somewhat north of 110,000 employees. We have 6 Verbund sites. Verbund is a German word that means interconnected, meaning that the product of one plant is raw material for another plant. So these are usually connected plants within a works, and about 350 other production sites globally. We have 5 business segments. In those 5 business segments, there's 13 divisions. On the left-hand side, you see the chemicals segment, which is basically commodities, petrochemicals, monomers, intermediates, so the base chemicals. Performance products, by and large, are especially chemicals, dispersions, additives, those kind of things are in there. The functional material and solutions, mainly materials, or have the catalysts, coating materials, construction materials. Then separately, the agricultural solutions with our crop protection division. And finally, oil and gas, which is not present in North America. That's only a business operated in Europe. In terms of research and development, we spend about 3% of sales for R&D. We have about 10 billion euros in annual sales of product launched on the market since 2011 from R&D activities, about 3,000 running research projects, 10,000 employees in R&D. In terms of R&D spend, in the commodities area, I would expect only about 10% going into there of the R&D spend. In the specialty area, 20% of materials, similar. Agricultural solutions, because that's much more demanding in terms of investments, we're up at 26%. Oil and gas, naturally, hardly any innovation there at 2%. And then we have also a fairly large corporate R&D unit, and that takes about 21% overall R&D spend. And speaking of those R&D units, on this slide you can see what they are: advanced materials and systems research, bioscience research, and process research and chemical engineering, are all fairly large. They're headquartered in different locations throughout the globe. And there's a strong connection then with the operating divisions that I mentioned before. We have a BASF New Venture, Innovation Management, and then on periphery, then working together with universities, customer industry partners, joint ventures, and research institutions. So it's quite a big ecosystem that we're handling with. Overall, we have about 600 collaborations with external partners, mainly with universities. And over the last couple of years, our approach to innovation has been changing quite dramatically from being a very central, Germany-specific or Germany-centered R&D organization, much more diverse, much more global, focusing on research topics, new processes and methods, and globalizing. So, for example, our advanced materials and systems research is now headquartered in Shanghai. Our bioscience research is headquartered in Research Triangle Park in US, and the process research and chemical engineering is in Germany. So here's a slide with the 70 sites that we have. The location that I'm at, Tarrytown, New York, didn't even make the cut for this slide, even though we have 200 plus employees here at this R&D site. So you can see a vast network of R&D locations. So I want to spend just a little bit of time introducing you to the three R&D divisions that we have. First one, Advanced Materials and Systems Research. It's primarily polymer research and small molecules research. So doing a lot in the additives area, in plastics, polymers, structural materials, surfactants, and also material physics and analytics. So basically this is real chemistry division, so to speak. Next one, bioscience research, has three areas. BASF has quite a long history in white or industrial biotechnology, with the intent basically to manufacture chemicals from renewable resources, which is quite a challenge because it takes a lot to make a product that's based on biomaterials actually financially feasible. What was lacking in our portfolio were enzymes. So we didn't have an expertise in enzymes. About 3.5 years ago, we acquired a company in San Diego called Uranium. So to complement the white biotech approach that we had, we also have now the enzyme chemistry. And the third area can be different. This is in Research Triangle Park, is the plant bioscience piece, looking at transfer of genes with desirable traits into crops. So better yield, better herbicide tolerance, better disease and pest resistance. And finally, the process research and chemical engineering division is what you expect to be there, developing improved synthetic methods for chemicals and intermediates, process engineering for solids and fluids. But we also have catalysis research in there, heterogeneous and homogeneous catalysis, mainly heterogeneous catalysis, and that unit is in Missoula, New Jersey. Then we have quite a strong activity in electrochemistry and battery side. Then high throughput experimentation, also looking at new materials and systems like metallic and organic frameworks, nanomaterials, and mineral processing. Because we're such a large company, there's always a danger that you end up with silos, and you have three research divisions. You have potential 3 silos. In order to break that down to some extent, we created what's called BASF Key Technology Capabilities. There's 21 of those overall, and 7 focus areas. You can see those on the slide here, from polymer technologies to enabling methods and so on. And that goes then across all of these 3 research divisions, and they then have their own portfolio of topics to pursue. Complementary to all of that, we have a unit that's called BASF New Business, and what they're charged with is basically looking into areas outside of our core businesses that I pointed out to you before. We have these 13 operating divisions and about 82 strategic business units. And these guys in BASF New Business are looking at the new areas. So they have one unit that is looking at scouting and incubation, looking at different markets that BASF could enter, throwing out most of them. And if they really complement with what BASF can do and what we'd acquire, it can become an own business. So from scouting, go to business buildup. So there we have 3 activities in e-power management. That's basically stationary power management, organic electronics, and 3D printing. So those are businesses that we're building up based on expertise, but also expertise that we can bring from external sources. And adjacent to that, we have BSF Venture Capital. So we have about a budget of 150 million euros for venture capital to get involved with startups, mainly late Series A and beyond. All activities have to be endorsed by a current business, so they can't do whatever they want and go off into pharmaceutical actives, for example. So it has to be connected with BSF and what we do. But the intent is to basically try new models, startups, actually, even with BSF technology. So it's a much more creative approach here. Then digitalization has become a very big topic, of course, in R&D, and all of the research divisions have their own approaches to how to handle big data and so on. And so it was decided to pool all these resources together, not in terms of decreasing the workforce, quite the contrary, to add more resources to it, because this is really a driver for the future. And actually, right now, we're installing the most powerful supercomputer for industrial chemical research. I think it's number 67 worldwide of all the supercomputers. So just really interesting how this works and how people start to play with this and take advantage of this opportunity. So in terms of success factors, what we want is that BSF is established in the key market, that we strengthen our connectivity with external partners. We have a much more stronger emphasis on creativity. Before, everything was driven by phase gates and going through different stages. And that's great for incremental research, but it's terrible for the creative piece of it. So opening that up, creating new tools and possibilities for researchers to get into new areas that they believe make sense for BSF. And also co-creating then solutions together with external partners. So how to work with BSF, that's probably a very important question for most of you. So we have a very long history of working together with external partners. Actually, the Bosch-Haber process is one of the first examples within BSF of working together with universities to bring up a really huge game changer more than 100 years ago. I mentioned before that with about 600 collaborations globally with universities, government labs, institutions, but historically they've been one-offs, not very structured, and we want to have a much more structured approach to this whole thing. And one question that I always ask external technology providers like universities, what are you really good at? What is your core expertise? And, or to rephrase it, what are you really proud of at your institution? That's important for us to know as we start building relationships. And one vehicle to do that is looking at technology briefs to understand what the core expertise is, because a lot of universities don't even know themselves where the strengths are. They might know some topics, but not all of them. And when it comes to technology briefs, I mean, they're great for us understanding what you're about, but we don't really license too much just on the spot when we receive a technology brief. So out of about 1,400 technology briefs that we received over the past 4 or 5 years, we've only had one licensing agreement straight away from that. But we have had probably about 20 joint development agreements come out of it. So it's a much higher success factor in terms of collaborations than is straight away licensing. Out of the collaboration, of course, then you get license agreements. Now, BSF Venture Capital engages with startups, but like I said before, it's primarily with late Series A. We haven't been too active with early stage startups up until a couple of years ago, but I think that's where really the high success rate is. And as part of the NCEP 2 selection committee for the demo day, we had a hit rate of about 20%, which is really great compared to the 5% hit rate that we had just by looking at technology briefs. With hit rate, I mean, is there's somebody within BSF interested in following up on that particular lead that we get from university. So from 5 to 20% is quite impressive. Plus, early stage startups are de-risked to some extent versus a technology coming from a university that hasn't really been vetted yet. So the chances of success are a bit higher. So moving to a more structured approach, we do have a program called Unique, with 15 universities, so which 6 are in the US. And that is basically based on scientific quality, relevance, and fit. But it's more for the tougher nuts to crack. And I have a slide here with 6 universities, or actually 7. So we have 2 postdoc centers that we call them, NORA on the East Coast and CARA on the West Coast, NORA being Harvard, MIT, and UMass Amherst, mainly looking at materials, but tough questions. So they're not ones typically that a business unit would go to, because the solutions there, in general, there are all exceptions, or could be 10 plus years off. And on the West Coast, more looking at the biosciences there and materials. It's with Berkeley, some extent with Stanford and UCLA. Being expanded also to UC Davis for the ag part. And then Texas A&M, mainly because we've had such a strong and long relationship with that university. It covers basically all the areas that we're interested in. But that does not mean that we cannot work with anybody else. So that's why it's important to understand what the expertise is of an institution to find out if this is the right partner for us moving forward. So in this slide, this is basically how we define the growth areas that we're interested in moving forward. So, I mean, most companies work off of this. You know, we're going to have around 10 billion people by 2050. 70% of the world's population will live in cities. 50% more energy will be needed by 2050. 30% more food. And that is basically driving force for the customer industries that we have on top: agriculture, health and nutrition, and so on. So from that, we figure out which are the areas that we need to be focusing on. Let's say on this slide, you see the big buckets of what BASF needs. So what we've been doing, and Ria mentioned that I run a network of about 50 technology scouts that are embedded in the different business units and research divisions. And annually, we ask them, what are your major needs that you have in your business? And they have a discussion with their business unit and come back with the various needs. And we put those into buckets. Some are large buckets, some are very small buckets, but there's about 30 of those here. And if you want to see this presentation, you can just send me an email. I can provide that. And I'll give you a couple examples of what these look like. So for example, in the additives area, there's a range of slides here, but you see different topics. You know, for example, the second one, halogen-free flame retardants for polyolefins, thermoplastics. That's no surprise. That's a big industry need, and of course also a need for us. We have 2 down there with, say, new light stabilizer technologies, one for hydroamines and one for UV absorbers, basically looking for new chemistries. So we know these chemistries, the tetramethylpiperidines, for example, very well, but is there anything else out there that can replace the current technology? So 2 different types of unmet needs here. In adhesive area, needs can be fairly specific, even though they're short. For example, the last one here, high refractive index, UV stable TPU with optical clarity, quite precise what we're looking for. In general, we don't want the unmet need to be hugely precise, because that will create kill creativity that we want people to develop. In the ag area, you can see another one that's very broad, technologies for better weed control. I mean, some of these needs are very broad. Because we're open to all kinds of topics, we need to change things. In the coatings area, here we're looking towards the bottom. You can see, effects, different coating effects. Actually, our division, coatings division, at one point said, what we need are advanced coatings. Now, what in the world does that mean? Because that unit was looking for game-changing effects. How can they change things on the marketplace? Because the current effects, I mean, everybody has products going into that. We need to find new things. And I believe this is the last of the examples. This one here from the dyes, pigments, and colorants area, looking for smart materials for high-tech greenhouses. So are there materials out there that can be used in greenhouses to promote growth? So color conversion to specific wavelengths that are conducive to the plants, or eye reflection, heat management. So all those kind of things could be really important for us moving forward. So some of these needs are very short term, but a lot of them are longer term, meaning 5 to 10 years. When you think of working with a university, you can't kid yourself. Most technologies coming from university till they actually reach the marketplace are going to be 5 to 10 plus years till they actually you get any revenue from them, because of all the time it needs to transfer technology, to scale it up, to get everything in place. If it's with a startup, it can be in a 3 to 5 year time frame. Anything less than that is going to be an acquisition of an existing product. So, like I said, these unmet needs are available. Just let me know and I'll be happy to share that with you. And I believe that's the end of the presentation. So I'd be happy to field any questions that you might have.
Hey, Werner, thank you very much. All right, so let's see. We do have some questions lined up. But before we go there, while we're prepping the questions, so again, Werner's presentation um, outlined their technology needs as well as what they're looking for, not just in their core business as well as other areas that they're interested in. So with that, as I mentioned earlier, we are doing this webinar series in order to help universities and startups decide which companies to put forward for the demo day in October. So our first deadline, we call it our early deadline, is on July 14th, and that's Friday. So hopefully, the people on the call learned enough about BASF needs to look at their portfolios, to look at their companies, their technologies in the university, and see if there are any companies there or technologies there that would catch Werner's attention. So again, the deadline is July 14th. And we'll send you a follow-up email, with the links and how to apply post-webinar. But right now, I think we should go to the questions that we have lined up for today. So let me just pull that up. Here we go. So our first question is up now. All right. So our first question is here. All right. So I hope everyone can see it. What type of guidance or mentoring do you provide universities and startups after you partner with them?
That really depends on the project itself that we'd be dealing with. So in general, if it's with the university, so it'll end up being a project on our end and some kind of collaborations then with the university. So what works best is really if there's, first of all, having the trust in there. And it can go all the way to having the university researcher come to one of our sites to work, or vice versa. They'll get a good insight of the market opportunity. With startups, there it can be a little bit different if it's with BASF Venture Capital, so they'll provide the right guidance also from a financial point of view. It'll be a little bit different, but they probably have a better mentoring program for our startup because they have quite a bit of experience with them. Again, it depends what geography it's in, if it's in North America or if it's in Europe or Asia.
All right. So our second question, let me pull it up. Do you prefer to work with startups that have angel or VC funding? Do startups from your venture fund also end up in your business units?
So BASF will never take the lead in the VC funding. That's just one of our policy. So the answer is yes. We prefer working with angel and VC funding. Probably not so much angel because that'd be early stage, but VC funding, yes. Some startups do end up in a business unit. We try to isolate them from the administrative issues associated with the large company. So we don't want them to be too strong integrated into business unit, but aligned with the business unit's portfolio. And sometimes, though, more often than not, they end up being part of BASF new business rather than being in one of the divisions, just to protect them from the whole burden of a business unit.
Okay, thank you, Werner. Our next question is, do you have an example of the health or nutrition categories, biotech or medtech more specifically?
So health and nutrition, we do have a category. I don't have it right in front of me, but that'll be in the portfolio that I can send you. When it comes to med tech, we don't do much. So we have a internal policy that nothing that we produce may stay in the body for more than a month. It's just for liability purposes. And we had looked at the medical device field that was part of BSF New Business a while ago, but it's very difficult for a company like BSF to extract enough value being a materials supplier and not a device supplier to justify research going on there. So medtech, large extent, is out. We do have pharmaceutical excipients, but no pharmaceutical actives, no medtech materials.
Okay, our next question is, how much non-core technologies do you engage with? Do you have specific examples?
Depends what non-core is. So if we define non-core as what goes on in BSF New Business, yes, there are quite a few examples of that. The latest one was Energy 2 that was acquired by BSF. Or in the battery area, there's been quite a few acquisitions, which now has become part of the core business. So I would say maybe 25% would be non-core, but it really depends on the nature of the needs.
Okay, so Werner, we have a couple more questions here. So let me see, and again, from the audience, if you have questions for Dr. Kaufman, now would be a good time to ask him very, either specific questions or general questions about how to engage with BASF. So we have two more lined up here, and let me just quickly put it up. Can you repeat again your hit rate for the demo day? What does it mean to have a high hit rate? Do you have tips for universities or startups to help them respond better to your technology needs?
Okay, sure. So the hit rate for the demo day was 20%. And the general hit rate from our leads database is 5%. And with hit rate, I mean, okay, we have a technology coming in. I have a look at that technology and figure out who should be receiving this directly. Everybody has access to technologies, but who should be getting an email from me to please have a look at that technology, and I'll follow up with them later on. And so that kind of hit rate is 5%. With the demo day was 20% because we're looking at the companies themselves, what their IP was, and pre-selecting those. So you would expect a higher hit rate, but didn't expect to be 4 times as high.
Okay. Oh,
Tips for
sorry.
universities to
Sorry, there it
respond.
is.
Okay, so I mean, the closer you can get to the topics that we're interested in, the higher the chances of a hit rate. So biofuels, for example, is not a technology that's of interest to BSF. It's not something that we're interested in. So don't send us any leads in the areas that aren't mentioned. But I'd rather you send me the lead and then I tell you, well, we're not interested in it, than you not doing anything. But I mean, the closer you can get to one of our unmet needs, the better. But don't expect everything to be a hit then. I'm always hoping for a hit rate of 20 to 30%. Higher than that, I wouldn't believe is realistic, but a 1% hit rate is too poor. And from talking with the other industry colleagues, that seems to be the rule. It got about 5% hit rate for random incoming leads. And otherwise, just ask us, if this is an area of interest, and we'll let you know. And by the way, what I didn't mention before, all those unmet needs that I mentioned on those slides come directly from a scout. So we know exactly who gave us that unmet need, and we can connect you then with that scout if you have a technology that is of interest, or if you have questions for one of the unmet needs, we can go back to that scout and connect you with them.
Okay, our next question is, what is the best way for a startup to go about seeking a partnership with BASF?
So, I mean, you can contact BSF Venture Capital if you're a later Series A. If not, it's probably better going through me. What I would need is basically a slide deck making your pitch. Having as much technical information that you're comfortable with sharing, need to be non-confidential, is good. But I understand that some of your IP is not protected yet, so don't mention that. But the more compelling it is, the more clear it is in terms of what you're trying to achieve and what your expertise is, the better. So we're not looking for details, but we're trying to understand, what are you good at? What is unique about you compared to other startups?
And maybe Werner to add to can submit to the demo day. So you can submit to the
That's
demo
right.
day too if you want to engage with BASF. So that's a way for you to to go about submitting the information for you for it to reach Werner's desk. So our next question
In
is
general,
okay. Our next question is in R&D collaborations. All right, our next question is in R&D collaborations with universities, is your model 100% sponsored research arrangement, or are you looking for match funding from government grants?
basically it's both. I mean, we haven't been doing that great a job in terms of look for matching funding from government grants, just because being a German-based company, we historically haven't been that comfortable with dealing with the U.S. government. Just, I'm not sure what the issue was, but it's been changing now. And so we welcome looking for matching funding from government grants where it's possible. It hasn't happened too often yet. There's maybe 3, 4 examples, but that's certainly the way we'd like to go.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. Hang on. How many deals did BASF do in the last year with startups?
That I have to look into. I'm not even 100% sure, but it's maybe in the area of 5, 6 that I've seen. Usually BSF has an announcement. Depending on what you mean with deals. Some have been publicly announced, others not, but about 6 that I've seen
Okay.
in North America.
Oh, okay. What happens when a startup is too early for BASF? Can you help develop the company?
Yes, it's not. We don't have much experience in this area. I think it's something that we'd like to move into. It depends what it means for a start be too early. I mean, if it's too early, then basically, um, again, is it too early for our business, or is it too early to engage with the startup? It's probably going to be a case by case basis, but I think if the conditions are right, we can do that. But we don't have a lot of experience yet. As we said, we've been changing our innovation model to become much more open. So this is something that we have to gather more experience with.
What does BASF do with federal labs? Is there a way to get federal technologies to you?
Yeah, this one's even more difficult because of lack of experience. We haven't had a whole lot of engagement with federal labs. It seems for us fairly complicated. We haven't really figured it out yet. How to get technologies to us is either through me or through our government affairs people in Washington, D.C. We have a couple people that interact with federal labs. But honestly, we haven't really been very successful in doing that, and we hope to do that in the future.
Okay, Werner, we have two more questions and then I think we can wrap up. What is an average deal size with startups?
It'll probably be up to 15 million. I'd say most of them are in a single digit, especially at the beginning. I've seen larger ones to 15 million, but we're usually not the lead VC.
Okay, and our last question for today. As an angel investor, what is the best way for me to work with BASF? You mentioned that you don't do much with angels.
Right. Probably the best way is to get in touch with BSF Venture Capital. So we have one person in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and two in Fremont, California. And I'd be happy to introduce you to them and see how I can work best with them. So that's probably the best way to engage with them. And if that doesn't work out, I mean, we can talk too. But I think the best starting point is with venture capital. There's always exceptions to the rule. When I say late Series A, I've seen them get engaged with universities even. So, you know,
Hmm. Okay.
no rule.
Mhm. Sorry, Werner, I talked over you.
No problem. Just no rule without an exception.
Okay, so thank you, Werner. Again, our featured corporate today is BASF, and Werner is the senior manager for technology scouting. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And again, I'd like to let everyone know because we've been receiving questions about this throughout the session. The slides and the recording will be available 24 to 48 hours after the webinar concludes. You'll receive an email from us um, as to where to find the recordings and the slides. Also, Werner, I think you mentioned that you had a document with more specific technology needs that you'd like to share with the attendees. Is that right?
That's right. So we
Mm-hmm.
have, I think it's about 55 slides or so,
Mm-hmm.
with all those buckets having separate slides attached to them, and then you can search through different unmet needs. Health and nutrition being one of those that it didn't
Mm-hmm.
show.
Okay. If you do you mind sending those to me so I could distribute them or?
No problem.
Okay. All
That's
right.
what they're there.
Okay. Great. All right, so we'll make that available to the audience as well. That more detailed deck that Werner mentioned of their technology needs. So if you want to engage with BASF, please make sure to submit your startup and your IP to the demo day. The first deadline, the early deadline, is on July 14th, which is this Friday. And to those of you in this webinar, if you're listening, I assumed you are interested in submitting your companies to the demo day. If you're a university and you have researchers that you think have companies, or sorry, have IP that would be of interest to BASF, please have them submit their, description of their IP for the demo day as well. So before we end today's session, Werner, do you have a couple of parting words to our audience this afternoon?
Well, thank you for attending the webinar, and I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you. Hopefully, you'll find some common ground with the PSL met needs. I'm sure you'll find some areas of overlap, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and hope that we can work together to create a win-win situation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Our next webinar is on July 13th with Eastman Chemical Company. Please stay tuned and watch out for announcements about this webinar series in your inbox. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Werner, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
You too. Thank you, Ria.